to another episode of Frank Finance, where you can get your honest financial information and your questions answered. Today's discussion is going to be about the investment vehicles that you can have for retirement. So, talking about 401ks versus IRAs. What are the benefits? What are the disadvantages? And which are better? All right, so let's talk retirement vehicles. So as discussed in previous videos, I will be going through a PowerPoint slide this time instead of an Excel document where we'll walk along and discuss various topics. And the PowerPoint will be in the Discord link below in the finance hashtag files for you to download and keep and review as you wish. All right, so let's get started here. 401k versus IRA. And retirement vehicles, you have to think really about three things here. So you have to understand your options. So 401k versus IRA, employer funded versus individually funded. That's how you really got to think of these two. I know there are other options out there. Let's keep it simple for this video. So basically that's the concept here. One is employer funded, one is going to be individually funded. And then understanding the tax. Are you going to go through a traditional plan or a Roth plan? And then what strategy do I recommend, which will be the final discussion here. And I also walk through the physical math problems, so it's very easy for you to see why these retirement vehicles are better than individual investing, as well as why it makes the most sense. All right. So let's start with 401k. So 401k is employer sponsored, meaning that you set it up through your employer. So let's go through the opportunities first. So the number one opportunity in my mind is that there's an employer match. Over 50% of companies out there, from what I've researched, will have an employer match out there. It ranges between 3 to 6% with the median about 3%. This is free money. I would always, always, always recommend at least contributing to the match. And from an ability to set it up, it's extremely easy. During open enrollment, when you first get hired, or each year, you're able to go out there and set your contributions percent that you'll put. This can get adjusted throughout the year, so if times are tough, you can always pull back and increase it. And so it's extremely easy. All you do is change the percent, it comes out of your check. Not a lot to it. And then, of course, the tax advantages. Why do this versus invest outside of the plan? So you would get tax advantages, whether it's deferred or the capital gains advantages. And then the disadvantages that I'd like to talk about. So these target funds that you'll typically set up through the ease of these plans will have management fees that are associated with it. Please pay attention to that. If you're going to go look at the thing that you're investing in the most, also look at your management fees outside of the maybe 5-10 year look back on how much it's gained in value. If you were ever to think about your value of your balance getting close to 500,000 or more, 1% of that would mean $5,000 is getting put to this team that's managing your funds, and over time that will add up and significantly eat into your balance. All right, so another disadvantage, if you withdraw your money early, so before the age of 59 and a half, you're actually going to get hit with a 10% penalty on top of potentially ordinary income taxes and other things that you need to think about. I have actually done this once in my life when I was transferring from my first job to my second, and I will say that that was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever done. It has significantly changed what my portfolio mix would have looked like today, and I wish I wouldn't have done it. Now, another thing to think about is there's certain loopholes, I guess you could call, out there that will allow you to take funds early. Now, I'm going to give you an example. The CARES Act recently has allowed individuals under certain circumstances to pull out $100,000 off their 401k, but have to repay it over 3 years and not get hit with a penalty. There are very few, call it loopholes, that are out there that allow you to pull funds out and not have the penalty. Mind you, all of these pulls that you make are going to be subject to ordinary income tax, and they're also going to be subject to you repaying it, putting it back in there. If you don't, then you get hit with the penalty. Another disadvantage would be that the minimum distribution at age 70 and a half is when this starts. The IRS has limits that requires you to pull out the balance divided by when they believe it needs to be zeroed out. So let's say that you're age 70 and a half and the IRS says that you need to have it at a zero balance at 95. You would just take your balance and divide it by 25. That is what is required to be pulled out. This is a very simplistic example. All of those limits vary by what age you are, whether you're 70, 75, 80, and you would have to look at the IRS table to actually see that. So just keep that in mind. All right, so now let's talk about, one more thing real quickly, because this is going to be important when we get to Roth. When you contribute to a 401k, you're able to contribute to right around $20,000 a year, and that excludes your employer match. So if you're trying to think of how much money you can put into a 401k per year, it goes up every year with inflation, some years faster than another, but just use the number to keep in mind is about 20,000. It's slightly above 20,000 in 2020. All right. So IRA. Let's talk IRAs. So what is an IRA? An individual retirement account. Now the key thing is it's individual, meaning you physically have to go out into a bank or to TD Ameritrade or to Fidelity and set up your account and how you're going to fund it. So what are the opportunities of an IRA? Well, there's a plethora of investment options with very low management fees. You have the ability to potentially invest more diversely and ignore target funds and management fees to ultimately grow your portfolio faster than you would in a 401k. You would also be able to pull out on contributions if it's a Roth IRA. So if, for instance, you put $10,000 in there and it grows to 15, you would be able to pull out $10,000 without a penalty. Now that's significantly different than the, call it loopholes, that allow you to pull money out but repay it in a 401k. So keep that in mind. It's a nice opportunity to having an IRA. And then of course the tax advantages, whether it's a deferred tax benefit or a capital gains tax benefit. Now what about the disadvantages? Now these are a little bit different than a 401k in that the limits on funding for a IRA is $6,000 if you're under the age of 50 and $7,000 if you're over the age of 50. Also, from a salary limit perspective, if you make more than $75,000, you cannot contribute to a traditional IRA. And if you make more than $139,000, you can't contribute to a Roth 401k. Now, like under traditional tax code, it's not as simple as just timesing that by 2 if you're married, filing jointly. For instance, I'll give you an example. For those that are around $200,000 married filing jointly, you will not be able to contribute to an IRA. Again, these limits change every year with inflation, so you will have to look at this each year to make sure that you are taking into account all of these limits. One thing I've always been curious about, and I definitely want to just make sure everyone understands, is if you contribute into an IRA, as soon as you hit these tax limits, you are not able to contribute to the accounts, and it doesn't mean you have to pull the funds out. It just means you can't contribute to them, and you can't take the benefits that you would have from contributing to them, but the account still can stay there. And then one more disadvantage is that there is no match. It's all funded by yourself. All right, so let's now switch over to understanding tax for both of these retirement vehicles. So what is traditional, what is Roth? So traditional means that tax is deferred. It means if you contribute dollars today, it's a deduction on your taxable income that you have today, meaning that your federal and state rates that you pay will reduce. And I'm talking federal income and state income. I'm not talking FICA, which would be your Social Security and Medicare. That is still taxed. And so every dollar you put in traditional reduces your taxable income. Now, that means when you pull the money out, you're taxed at those rates. So you're probably going to see in my strategy at the end here, there's some things to think about is that your federal rate could change and your state rates could change. So if you live in California today and you're paying, you know, some insane tax rate over there, and you move to Florida, Texas, or Nevada, and that's where you withdraw your funds, you pay zero income taxes. So keep that in mind as an option when you're in traditional. But you're also always subject to federal rates increasing. They have historically remained relatively flat unless you were a very high income earner. You've experienced significant changes over the last 100 years, and those things need to be considered differently. But for the majority of the population and the median household income, your tax bracket has actually stayed relatively flat over the 30 to 50 year span. All right, so now Roth. What is Roth? Roth means you pay tax today on those dollars you contribute, and all gains in the future are not taxable. So, again, if you're thinking against a traditional and you put money into a Roth, you're basically betting that your rates that you're going to pull money out in the future are going to be higher than the rates today. That is something to think about, is why you would want to go into a Roth. All right. So what is my ultimate strategy? So here's what I would recommend. First and foremost, always go with the 401k match. Hit that first. Whatever that percent is, go with that. The next thing that I believe most people would agree on is to max a Roth IRA. Put $6,000 in there, $500 a month is what you would be able to put into that if you can. This gives you two vehicles here. And again, then after you're completed with that, if you still have extra funds, I would then go and max your 401k. And if you're able to do all of that, you will have the gravy train. It will just be raining money at retirement. And one thing to keep in mind is this really comes down to your own personal preference, but I would put my 401k at a traditional rate and I would put my IRA at a Roth. This gives you more advantages in the future to be able to kind of play a game where you're able to keep your income at certain limits in the future to maybe play what is the best option on your tax brackets down the road. And so that is why I like traditional 401k. Then you go into Roth IRA because of the advantages those will give you. All right, so as promised, here is the math problem that I want you to think about. If you're still with me, this is very informational to think about, and I think a lot of people don't discuss this in their point of views on IRAs versus 401ks, and so here we go. Here's the math. So if you're going to contribute, let's say you have $5,000 that you can contribute in a given year. How are you going to think about it? Well, in a traditional bucket, 401k, you would be able to contribute $5,000 because it's fully tax deductible, which means you don't pay any taxes. If you're thinking about putting it into an IRA, if $5,000 is all you can put in, you realistically can only put $4,000 in because you have to pay $1,000 in tax on the earned income up front. Okay, so if you're following me here, it's 25%. I've got the rates on the left here. So again, to keep everything apples to apples, same concept happens with personal investments. You put $4,000 in, the income that you made on that $4,000 is going to be taxed, which means you ultimately have to pay $1,000 in tax, which gets you to $5,000 in value for all three buckets. So now let's say you retire, your value grows at a 5 times multiplier, so 5,000 times 5, 4,000 times 5. You have 25,000 in 401k, 20,000 in Roth, 20,000 in personal investment. So what would be subject to ordinary tax? Well, you'd have to pay the federal rate, and I'm again assuming the federal rates stay the same. You pull 5,000 out for tax value there. All of it is taxed at ordinary income rates, which could change. What you note here is what I have noted here is I don't have state in there because to me, I'm going to be retiring in Florida, Texas, or Nevada. There's no way I'm not going to take advantage of that. It's a beautiful state. It's warm weather. I will definitely be taking advantage of those tax savings in the future. And so your 401k value retirement is worth $20,000 after tax. Now let's think about your IRA. IRA, the retirement value is $20,000. Again, you only pay tax up front, and so you pay no tax at retirement. You pull it all out tax free. It's worth 20,000. Now, for personal investing, your value increased to 20,000. You are subject to capital gains rate, which are anywhere between 0 and I think it's 24% if you're in the extremely wealthy population. But for the most part, most of us will pay 15% on capital gains. This individual would have 3,000 that would have to be taken out, so they would only have 17,000. So hopefully this math problem here is showing you that both vehicles that are for retirement would result in nearly a good sizable savings over personal investing. It gives you the edge to put money in there, limiting when you can pull it out, of course, but gives you those tax advantages that would boost how much you would have in retirement. All right, so hopefully that helped out those that want to understand the differences between traditional and Roth and 401k versus IRA. And as always, please, if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, comment below on something else you'd like to hear. This is ultimately a viewer request, so if there's certain things you want to understand or learn more about, please comment below on what you would like to hear, and I will make a video as soon as I can on it. So as always, have a great rest of your day, and thank you for tuning in. Bye now.